This story is about Kakyu, a former Japanese who reincarnated as a lower devil in hell. He sat on a slain dragon, ate the meat and shouted, as expected, "Roasted thunder dragon meat is the best." He made a great souvenir for the villagers. Later, he was riding a cart towards the village. June 1013, on the sacred calendar, Join Village, an agricultural stronghold in the western lands of the Zogul Kingdom. Meanwhile, the village was going on with its usual measured life. Children were running, playing, men were doing various jobs. A guard was sitting and yawning at the entrance to the village. He said how hungry he was, then heard the sound of an approaching cart, looked into the distance and shouted, "Kakyu." The protagonist waved his hand and shouted back, "Hi, Grandpa. Are you still alive?" The guard replied, "What is he talking about? He is full of strength even at night." Kakyu got off the cart and shouted for him to stop. He made him imagine it. He laughed in response. Then the protagonist took out a coin, handed it to him and said, "Here is his entrance fee." Grandpa raised his hand, did not agree, loudly replied that he did not need it. He was already like one of their own in their village. Kakyu seriously replied that this would not work and asked, "Rules are rules, right? A rule is like a promise to yourself, and he always keeps them to the end." Later there was a celebration, and the whole village gathered, happily ate the meat that he cooked. One of the villagers raised a mug up and shouted, "Very tasty." The protagonist held out a tray with meat and shouted, "Today he is treating them so that they can eat as much as they want." One of the guests shouted, "He is so generous, Kakyu." Arno stood up, pointed towards the meat and asked, "Is he sure he wants to give that much meat? It looks very high quality, and there is a lot of it. What animal is it from?" MC scratched his chin and answered, "A thunder dragon." Arno was indignant, told him to stop lying. The protagonist got angry and shouted, "He is not lying. He hunted it himself." He continued that he will never be able to defeat the legendary dragon. Then Alma came up, grabbed the protagonist by the hand and shouted, "Enough, that's it. Her Kakyu never lied to anyone." He wiped the tears from his eyes and said, "She is his only ally, Alma." Arno grabbed him by the neck, pointed at him and said, "Father will never give the go-ahead for this. Never." So that she would look at this scoundrel. Slanted eyes, smirk, stupid hairstyle. All scammers are like that. At this time, Jules came up to them and brought mugs of beer and suggested that they think about it. An excellent candidate. He has money to burn. He can afford such meat. Arno told her to wait, Jules. Alma shouted, "That's right." One of the villagers laughed and shouted. They drove him into a corner. Arno. He added, "So be it. He also blesses this union, Kakyu, so that he takes his great-granddaughter." The girl shouted, "Grandfather." The protagonist laughed and he continued, "So it was decided by a majority vote." The protagonist shouted, "It's not that simple." Later, when almost everyone left, Arno was taking the rest of the meat, turned to the protagonist and asked, would he stay again today? He wiped the table and asked, "Does he mind?" He would be very grateful. She was happy and shouted, "Hooray." At this time, Jules was bent over in the corner of the room, holding her stomach and moaning. Arno saw and shouted, "Is she okay, Jules? She's pregnant, so she should rest." At this time, the protagonist came up and asked how the baby was feeling. She held her stomach with her hand and answered, "Too energetic. All thanks to the meat he brings." "And when will the baby be born?" Jules answered that she thought in a month. The protagonist raised his hand to his chin and thoughtfully said, "Well, in a month, as soon as he finishes all his business with trade, he will definitely visit them again." They all smiled, and Jules said, "Okay, she's sure the child will be glad to see him too." He reached his room, fell face down on the bed, and said that he was tired, then lay down more comfortably and began to reason. Although what a miracle it is that he can live such an ordinary life. A long time ago, having interrupted his earthly path in Japan, for numerous sins committed during his life, he was cast into hell, and by some miracle was reborn as a demon. From then on, his life became a torment. Hell was full of demons and monsters, and he was constantly at risk of being killed by more powerful demons. Because of the petty quarrels between the god of hell and the god of heaven, wars between heaven and hell constantly broke out, and he was always on the verge of death. There was no talk of peace. And yet, for 2,000 long years, he tried his best to survive, and somehow he managed to gain the wisdom and strength needed to survive in hell. However, the supreme god of heaven folded his arms and shouted, "It's time to pay. He's a bastard." The supreme god of hell stretched out his hand and laughed and shouted, "He'll send him to the next world, you old goat." He thought he didn't have time to knock him down. The god of heaven swung and struck, and the god of hell was able to hold back the blow, and the battle continued. He realized that this time it was finally over. 2,000 years of torment. He tried, but he woke up, and now he is in another world. Alien to our Earth. Took time to comprehend the current situation, but having taken the form of a man, he traveled around the world, exploring it. 3 years ago, he found this village, and, pretending to be a wanderer who lost his memory, studied the language and culture. Now he is a traveling merchant. To be honest, he thinks that he is too lucky. Everything is so good that sometimes it seems to him that he is still sleeping. After all, 2,000 years is an eternity. Literally experienced all the circles of hell. The fact that he now does not hide from the fear of death every day and can eat normally and sleep in a bed, is this not enough luck? Moreover, thanks to these 2,000 years in this other world, he became something like in those old novels he once read, he is too cool and all? Yeah, this is just a bonus level in his demonic life. He raised his head up and shouted, finally the dream of a quiet life will come true. You can't miss the opportunity to have fun. He laughed loudly. At this time, Alma brought him water and looked at him in surprise. He cleared his throat, then asked, Alma, why did she come to him? She became embarrassed and said, Mom asked me to bring him water. He thanked her and said that he was just dying of thirst. She continued embarrassedly and also handed him gloves and shouted, Here. She asked him to take them. He took them in his hands and asked, Gloves? She agreed, then added, she made them herself. Her dad advised her to. They say that merchants get calluses on their palms from constantly pulling on their horses' reins, but he doesn't seem to be wearing gloves. The hero tried these on and shouted, they fit him just right. They feel nice, and they're bright red too. It must have been difficult to make them. Well done, Alma. She raised her hand behind her head, smiled and said, Oh, no problem. You're welcome. He smiled and said, Oh, he'll treasure them, and thanked Alma. She smiled, raised her head and shouted, Nothing's too much for my future husband. Then she headed for the exit, started closing the door and said, He's it. Then she won't disturb him while he rests. He agreed and thanked her again. He sat on the bed, looked at the gloves on his hands, and thought that she would forgive him. Alma, but he's a demon, he can't have calluses on his hands, and he can't marry her. She ran home contentedly, hugged her mother and thought, what is it like to have a family? And he lay and thought, eternity is his only legacy. He does not know what the count of years is. For him, a demon, time is an endless river. The next morning they were sitting and having breakfast, and Arno asked if they were going fishing after breakfast. Then he noticed the gloves on his hands and thought, it looks like Alma gave him the gloves after all. Later they were sitting with fishing rods on a log. The protagonist showed him the gloves and said in a satisfied voice, yes, she did a great job. Arno replied, ah, how great. He would like to have some like those too. Then he remembered and added, even if his daughter said something about marriage, that will never happen. The protagonist looked at him, got angry and asked, what the hell is he talking about? Then he thought, he's not stupid. What is he saying? Then Arno got angry and shouted, so he thinks that Alma has no attractiveness? MC replied, damn, he doesn't want to become his son-in-law, so he'll calm down. He replied, at least they have something in common. The protagonist continued, and anyway, what good could Alma find in someone like him? He replied, yes, only that he saved her life, a kind of reason for marriage. Alma was frail from birth. They said that she would not live to be 10 years old. Didn't he notice how she always tried to look cheerful in public? And at home, she spent almost all her time in bed. But it's been about a year and a half since he returned from his first trip. She started eating meat and spices. He remembers the first time he set foot on their land. He didn't know what to expect from him then, but now he's grateful to him, Kakyu. And not only he, the whole village is grateful to him. He only had bad memories, he thought. It's all because of him, and now they're grateful to him. Arno raised his fishing rod and shouted, come on, and told him to listen, Kakyu. He asked, will they get to the point? He caught a fish, showed it to the protagonist, and continued. So, an order came from the capital. He was being taken into the army. Kakyu asked, why suddenly? He answered, no, he was always in reserve. Demons have become active in the Urals lately. Then he asked, he's a merchant. Haven't heard anything about this? He thought about it. He usually moves through portals, so he didn't notice anything. Arno continued, and now, if something happens to him, he wants to ask him to look after Ars and Alma. The protagonist asked in surprise, Ars? Is this Juice's child? He realizes that's a boy's name, right? And the gender of the child is still unknown. He disagreed and added, this time it's definitely a boy. He can feel it. Okay, the protagonist said, but don't entrust them to him. Come on, don't. Arno replied, just in case he knows his father was eaten by demons. You never know what can happen. The protagonist asked, is he sure he wants this? He agreed and added that he wants him to look after them. He concluded, but he makes no promises to him. After a while, Kakyu put the last bag in the cart and thought, only 30,000 reals. He thanked him. He replied, you're welcome. Alma asked, when will he come back next time? He replied, probably at the end of next month. He will come see her little brother. Then he knelt down and said, and also, Alma. She came up to him. He put a necklace on her neck and added, it is a necklace made of dragon scales, a token of gratitude for the gloves, so that she would take care of herself. He got into the carriage, turned around and saw how people had gathered to see him off. They were shouting, Kakyu-san, and thanking him, and Alma was waving her hand at him. With the help of magic, he quickly teleported to the city, walked through the market, bought goods. After that he found himself not far from the city, stood and looked at the road. July. the city of Viperna, the capital of the dragon kingdom of Gizaria. The protagonist entered the administration. One of the employees pointed to the table with her hand and said, "Here is his certificate for promotion to a mid-level merchant and a bill of exchange. Now he can do business with aristocrats." She congratulates him. He scratches his head and thanks her. Later he goes into the store, looks at the goods, and the saleswoman asks, "Made of dark fabrics, how does he like it?" He scratches his chin and says, "Okay, he'll take it. Great. A gold coin, please." She looks at the shirt and says, "But that he is already of an intermediate level." She thought he was still a beginner. He laughs and says, he will have fun when he returns to the village. She asks, "By the way, he is from the Urals, right? Be careful there. An expedition of holy knights has left for there, now." The protagonist asks in surprise, "Holy knights? Why?" She asks, "Does he not know? They say that holy knights blessed by the goddess can sense the presence of demons. Every few years they are allowed to conduct a special expedition to the neighboring countries to destroy all the demons that are hiding. That's what the rumors say." Protagonist held his chin in his hand and thought, taking advantage of the fact that people are unable to sense the presence of a demon, the holy knights slander the villages, accusing them of witchcraft, and under this pretext, they carry out robberies. She raised her hand and advised him to be careful when he returned to the Urals. He quickly left, then stood around the corner, stretched out his hand and said, "Mana summoning," and when it got dark, he went to get his cart, began to lead the ox and thought, use teleportation magic in the middle of the city. He would not want to do this, but he has no choice. He has such an unpleasant premonition. He used magic, and he immediately found himself near the village. He moved the tall grass with his hand and saw some smoke, then ran on and noticed how smoke was billowing out of his village. He frowned and thought, smoke? Fire? No, anything but that. He ran towards the village and thought to calm down. Maybe it wasn't that bad. The smoke could be from cooking. They often burn grass in these parts, although yes, it was clearly not the season. If it was a fire, he could handle it. He thought that the guard would be sleeping as always. Alma would run towards him with her father. But no, there was a whole wall of fire in front of him. Walking further, he saw dead villagers on the ground. He fell to his knees and screamed hysterically, then looked around and saw his dead grandfather. Arno and Jules came closer and saw Alma. What happened? Who did this? The protagonist screamed for an explanation. After that, he used the devil's eye, soul observation abilities. MC saw the souls leaving people's bodies. Then an image flashed through his mind. The villagers kneel before the holy knights and shout, "Holy knights, wait! They don't know anything about demons." The knights galloped forward and shouted for them not to lie. There was clearly a demonic presence in this village. And also this meat. Isn't this dragon meat? Without the magical abilities inherent in demons, it is impossible to kill a dragon. One knight raised a spear to Arno and barked, "If he is innocent, then let him tell where he got this meat from." Arno said this and fell silent. The knight looked at him and asked, "Is he obviously covering for someone?" Then the knights shouted, "These are the demon's minions, that they must be killed." He came to his senses, leaned over her and asked, were they protecting him? Why did this happen to him? In his past life, he saw his father's death. Kakyu thought he couldn't save anyone again. He got angry and yelled, "Are they kidding?" Yes, they are. Then, with the help of magic, the devil's eye, Soul Seeker, he found traces of the expedition. The protagonist concentrated energy in his hand and sent a flash of energy into the sky. The projectile flew far ahead. Everyone paid attention to it. The flash reached the knights. One turned around and loudly asked, "What's there?" Another asked, "What do you want?" "Get lost." The first added, "He is the commander." A powerful explosion was created. The protagonist thought, for 2,000 years he wandered through the bottomless abyss of hell, where every moment was saturated with the pain of loss. There is no place for hope, only eternal darkness, hunger and thirst for death. He became a shadow of himself, a monster devoid of any humanity. He defiled souls and devoured flesh. He turned himself into a creature worthy only of hell. And this village became the first victim of his fall. He was going to use them to get information, and if they interfered, he would kill them all. However, he felt so good, laughing without mocking, enjoying delicious food, feeling the warmth of other people's hands. He experienced all this for the first time in 2,000 years. It was priceless. And they, the gods of hell, want to take even this away from him. If he still loses, then the demon took possession of him more and more. He thought, everything is broken. Really, he still resisted and said, "No, it's not like that." And the thoughts of the devil filled his head, so that he remembered, Kakyu, what is he? Throwing his body, he rose to his full height and screamed, "He is the devil," and began to make a terrible roar. The devil filled his head, so that he remembered, Kakyu, what is he? Throwing his body, he rose to his full height and screamed, "He is the devil," and began to make a terrible roar. Somewhere far away in his thoughts he remembered his communication with Alma. She held his hand and he said, yes, he understands that he was wrong, but he can no longer stop this process. Such is his true nature. Then he asked, perhaps he disappointed her? She shook her head, denying it. He knelt down in front of her, apologized and said that now he had nothing left. For him, they were the only family. So she stretched out her arms to him, pressed him to herself and noticed that he should listen. Could he hear? Suddenly he heard a child crying nearby, saw a box, opened it, and there was a small child crying. He gradually began to turn into a man again, looked and saw the necklace that he gave to Alm, and thought in surprise, when was he born, baby? Had a month already passed? He remembered their conversation with Arno when he asked, he understands that this is a boy's name, right? And the gender is still unknown. Arno did not agree and added, this time it is definitely a boy. He feels it. He asked, is he sure he wants this? He agreed. At that moment, the main character took the child in his arms, cried, pressed him to himself and thought, Ars, this will be his unbreakable oath. The demon Kakyu will make Ars his son and raise him as the happiest man in the world. He swears on his soul. The protagonist lifted the child up and thought, Arno, he is very sorry that he couldn't give him his promise that time. But now he promises, don't worry Ars. From now on, his life will be full of happy moments, because the devil's promise is unbreakable. At that time, the god of hell and the god of heaven were sitting and playing chess. The god of heaven exclaimed, what an idiot he is. The god of hell added, what kind of devil would make a contract, put his soul as payment? The god of heaven asked, probably some lower devil Kakyu. The god of hell agreed with him and added, that's right. It was because of him that he was able to go to this world, idiot. The bowels of hell. He said he had so much hope for him. The god of hell continued, after all, he was the only one of his kind, a lower demon who had never died in 2,000 years and achieved power comparable to that of higher demons. He replied that he knew, but if this lower demon dared to harm another world, he would burn the hellish land to the ground, exterminate all its servants. He laughed and asked, is this sarcasm? He already destroyed them. The god of hell laughed and shouted, they will see, old man. That fool picked up a human cub. The god of heaven smirked and said, what an irony of fate, because in the future this child will kill Kakyu. The protagonist took the child, and they walked away. The road that the demon and the human child walk. Magic World, Royal Residence. Demon King Zel Melkinos, Lucifer sat on his throne and asked, so, is this all true? The servant agreed and added, His Majesty, his subordinate who was monitoring the actions of the Holy Knights, personally witnessed it, so there is no doubt. He answered, I see. It is possible that there is someone who is not inferior to him in strength, and perhaps even superior. Then he turned and said, His Majesty, by order of the Insect Lord, an investigation team was formed and has already been sent to the scene. The Demon King raised his hand to his forehead and said, Teokia, one of the 4 great demons, has jumped to conclusions. Order all the demons under his control not to interfere in this matter. He leaned over and answered, Yes. At this time, Hades laughed and said, What a coward he is, Father. Shouldn't he go there himself and check it out? The demoness ordered to stop talking. Hades, in public he must call him His Majesty. They are probably hiding so that even the heavens won't notice their presence. And once the deed is done, they will erase all traces of this incident. If they are attacking the Holy Knights, then they are clearly not their enemies. For now they can only observe the situation. Then he chuckled evilly and thought, but in the end, they will end up in his hands. The world of people, the lands of the Holy Church of Caramiel. They walked through the city. The 58th Pope of Caramiel, Arlaeus de Caramiel, raised his hand, and the people of the city looked at them and shouted for them to look. Saint, how beautiful she is. She held the baby in her arms, and he said, when he heard about the events in the Urals, he was so scared. If the legends are true, the Holy Maiden will definitely find her hero. Jid Kruger, the commander of the Order of the Holy Knights of Caramiel, said, the birth of an heir will bless the people. This is great news, he added, and at the same time she gave them hope in the form of the Holy Maiden. As a priest who protects humanity, as a head of state, and most importantly, as a father, he feels like a little weight has been lifted from his shoulders. Jid Kruger thought, the aristocracy does not seem to be delighted, and said, but now he thinks even they will understand that it is not the time to engage in political intrigue. After all, the birth of the Holy Maiden means that danger is approaching the world of people. They got into the carriage. She held the baby in her arms and said, true. But His Holiness should not worry. She is sure that this girl will bring them the true hero. He agreed and added that they should pray for the blessing of the goddess to be with her. Map of the worlds. The world is divided into 3 levels. Heaven, the human world, and hell, connected by a world tree. Heaven, this world is inhabited by the gods, including the goddess of creation and angels. Hell, this world is inhabited by powerful demons and other evil creatures, ruled by the Demon King. The human world, There are 4 continents, east, west, north, and south, inhabited by humans and various races. Dear residents of Yorn village, this is Kakyu. The goats licked him contentedly. Later, he milked the goats and thought, it's been a month and a half since he took ours in. To get milk in the mornings he has to milk the mountain goats brought from the village. No need to worry, ours is fine. The protagonist entered the house with cans full of milk, saw him crawling around the house and screamed, Ars, he's running away again. He thought, this child is restless. He's only 2 months old and he's already so active? He caught him and shouted, great. He was hungry so he should wait a bit. He put him in the carrier, started pouring milk and thought about it. But after a month and a half of fatherhood, he had already gotten the hang of making milk. Then, he said, first you need to boil the water. And after the water bath, cool it down to a warm state. Done. Everything is sterilized. Handmade bottle. He picked up ours, gave him the bottle and thought, let him drink. Isn't it delicious? Well, no big deal. The taste of goat milk can change a little from day to day. Apparently his baby is just a gourmet. In that case, here it is for him. Berry jam and a little sugar will make it tastier. Wanted him to try it one more time. What's wrong? He threw up. Milk got on his clothes. The main character freaked out and sat in the corner of the room, then stood up, clenched his fists and thought, no, you can't give up like that. Then he went to the crib and said, he's dirty with milk. Now he'll change his clothes? Started changing him and shouted at him not to move like that. Honestly, he never thought that raising a child would be so difficult. He doesn't underestimate it, not by any means. But he who spent 2,000 years in hell, fought, he knew thousands of spells, he was sincerely confident that he could handle it much more gracefully. However, the reality is that he doesn't know a spell to clean diapers, nor a spell to make ours laugh. And he certainly doesn't know a spell to stop crying at night. Mothers are real heroines. Later, the child fell asleep and the protagonist folded his arms, said he was very happy, and thought, thank God. Well, sometimes raising a child seems so hard that he remembers hell, but one look at that sleeping face as all his strength returns to him. Maybe Jules and Arno feel the same way? He would like to show them this, and then fell asleep. Then an inner voice woke him up, hey. Why did he fall asleep? When ours falls asleep, it's time for housework. You need to do the laundry, chop wood, take care of the animals, work in the garden. Later, he finished weeding, wiped the sweat from his forehead with his hand and said, by the way, I completely forgot to say, he and ours moved. They moved from the Ural Kingdom to the southern continent, to the country of Elbrant, across the sea. Their new home is in the forest in the central part of this country. The reason for the move was that he killed the holy knights, and the church could start hunting for him. The lands of believers are not the place to raise a child, although he does not think that they will be able to reveal his true nature from his magic, but still, just in case. Well, since they had moved, he would like to introduce their new home, a new dwelling from an ancient, restored elven fortress. It is a dwelling carved out of the rock, once a watchtower on the road, but now that no one is left in these parts, it has been forgotten. The house fits in well with the surrounding nature. It has a beautiful view. And although it is located in a tropical forest right on the equator, thanks to the fact that the main part of the house is underground, it is always cool here. The interior, furniture, and bed he brought with him, he rebuilt everything inside with magic. The doors and chimney were added later. There was a broken well, but Kakyu equipped it with magic. This is one of the shelters he found and occupied during his travels before settling in the village of Jorn. Although the forest is quite dense, just in case, he still additionally strengthened the camouflage magic curtain, because there might be someone as perceptive as those holy knights. The house was old, of course, but in hell the houses he built usually turned into ruins the next day. Maybe he would gradually expand it and add to it and eventually he would have a whole castle? What a joke. Then it would not be a shelter, but a fortress. Oh well. The protagonist scratched his chin and thought, his house. He had dreamed of it for 2,000 years, he had to take care of it. Suddenly, lightning struck and hit the house straight away. The protagonist screamed, his house. Then he ran into the room and screamed, ours. Is he okay? He picked him up, lifted him up, looked at him and thought, thank God, it seems he was not hurt. He looked up and thought, but there is a hole in the ceiling. An animal? No, it's thunder. And where did it come from in such weather? Then ours began to move. The protagonist looked at him and thought, what's the matter? At that moment, ours sneezed. The protagonist thought, it seems that ours has magical abilities since birth. He was already starting to wonder why this is considered a common occurrence in this world, because in the village of Jorn, almost no one knew how to use magic. And then the only explanation comes to him. Dragon meat. He thought about it, he treated all the villagers to it. For about a year and a half, he regularly brought it to the village, and the only child born during this period with abilities was ours. If we assume that the magical energy of the eaten dragon meat somehow affected the fetus at an early stage of development, then it turns out that ours was born in a human body, but at the same time possesses the magical energy of a dragon. So, it is all his fault. Maybe that is why he is growing so quickly? He's burdened this child with a terrible inheritance. It is unlikely that Ars will be able to live an ordinary life in human society. Ars still needs someone other than him. The protagonist began to clone himself in a reduced size using magic, he said, creating magical creatures. These little creatures, which he calls mini Kakyu, he can control at will. In hell, where there was no place for fine work, they were useless. But with household chores, he thinks they can handle it. Life will be a little easier, and began to teach them household chores. Suddenly, he got angry, punched his jaw and thought, they can be controlled remotely. Looks like they still need more training. Oh well. He himself originally planned to raise him alone. Compared to hell, where there was constant fighting, natural disasters and chaos, raising a child alone is just a walk in the park. He raised his head up, clenched his fists and screamed, Ars, let him look at his father. He will do everything to raise him the best person. In 2 weeks. Day and night, every 2 hours feeding, changing diapers, waking up at night, running away. He only manages to calm the child down long enough to do housework, the garden, the cattle, and magic. He has to constantly patch up holes in the house. There's no time left for work or hunting. Food supplies are also running low. And on top of everything else, when he coughs, explosions, when he laughs, hurricanes, when he pees, a powerful stream of water appears. If he cries, a thunderstorm. He is not in hell, but he wants to sleep for at least an hour. The main character went to the bed and thought, hey, why is he sad? He stroked his hair with his hand and thought, this is a child, and slowly fell asleep. He had a dream. He stood by the door and asked how many times this had happened already. He raised his hand and said, this is his job, there is no choice. He continued, he likes this school and he will stay. Father asked, should I pay for the rent? He shouted that he will earn it himself. He doesn't just go on business trips, it's for his future, so that he doesn't dare decide everything himself. His father said that now he needs to study, not work. He turned around and shouted, he didn't ask for this. Then he slammed the door and looked at the altar of his dead mother. Suddenly he opened his eyes, rubbed them and asked, did he fall asleep? Then he ran into the room, defeated them, and asked in surprise, goblins. He wondered how long he slept. MC started screaming, Ars. Where is he, Ars? Then he covered his mouth with his hand and it dawned on him, not that, was he kidnapped? Then with the help of Devil's Eye and Soul Observation magic he began to look, saw the road and rushed. He was so exhausted that he didn't even notice how the goblins entered the house. He had put up a protective circle. What had he done? What kind of father is he at all? He ran and mentally asked, Ars, be okay, he's running. He ran deep into the forest, lifted a large bush and saw a family of goblins. An elf girl was holding Ars in one hand and strangling a goblin with the other. Sebas asked, who is this? The protagonist looked and thought, a dark elf and a slave? Why in such a remote place? Ars saw him and screamed, Dad. Sebas turned to MC, but he didn't understand anything. He spread his hands and said, he doesn't know the language. But still, he is a father, and this is his son. He is grateful for saving him. After the man apologized and added, he didn't know he was a foreigner. Sebas added, they were rushing to the holy city and saw the goblins who stole the baby. Oh, how glad he was that they managed to find his father so quickly. Then he turned to the girl and asked Elsa, let her give the child to the father. The main character stretched out his hands to the child and said, Ars, he apologizes, he was probably scared. But before he could finish speaking, Elsa took the child back and asked for forgiveness. Then asked, is he really the father of this child? Does he know where he is now? This is the Great Borkley Forest. Fire dragons live here, and people avoid this place, considering it an uninhabited wild forest. Far from busy roads, along an old path, one lightly dressed foreigner with a child in his arms. This looks more like a kidnapping of a child. She will ask again, is he really the father of this child? The protagonist thought about it. He tried not to think about it. Is he really suitable for Ars as his father? He does not know for sure, but he can say one thing with certainty. He apologized and added that he could not tell her the details, but for him this child was the most precious son in the whole world. She closed her eyes and apologized to him. She was impolite to ask such questions. He asked her not to say that. He was not angry with his son's benefactor. Her distrust was understandable. She said goodbye, and when he thanked her, she added that it was not necessary to thank slaves. Then he saw her enter the carriage where the cage was, the door closed, and they rode on. He stood with the child in his arms and looked after them. In fact, he guessed everything, but tried to hide it, until she asked him, Ars has no one but him. Ars cannot live an ordinary life. He thought that he could raise him alone, for his sake, but he was wrong. It was for his sake. He was afraid. The more people appeared next to him, the heavier was the horror of their loss. Because he wanted to keep Ars by his side, alone. But is that how a father should act? Deprive Ars of the opportunity to find friends, love, dreams, then he will only become the same father to Ars as he had. Even if there are more dear people, he will never allow himself to lose them. He must be ready to protect them at any cost. To become a real father to Ars, to fulfill the promise made that day. He pressed him and asked, Ars, what does he think about this? He stretched out his hands to him, and the protagonist said, yes, he is right. Then he lifted him up and shouted, good. Then Dad will try his best. The child smiled widely. The protagonist added that they would find someone who would become their family. The beginning of the search for a wife and stepmother? The federal kingdom of Elfland, the southeastern part of the Great Forest, the ravine of the heavenly waterfall. He shouted, it worked, and finally managed to steal the dragon egg. The warrior said, incredible. Another added, not to get cocky. They will be happy when they return alive. Then he turned and asked, they are far enough away now, that dragon didn't chase them, right? Victor said not to worry. They did cast a barrier to hide magic and aura, right? The magic caster agreed. For the ritual of immersing the egg in the waterfall, 8 battle slaves and 4 S-class magical monkeys were sacrificed. Nothing, not even a fire dragon, would withstand such a force. They will compensate for these losses with the stolen egg. The magic caster reminded them not to forget that they will divide the spoils in a ratio of 3-to-1. Victor said that he will conduct all negotiations himself. They moved on and suddenly heard a sound. One asked, what is it? The other answered that he has no idea, and Victor shouted, idiot, let him hide quickly. They hid behind a log, looked out. In the distance they saw a fire dragon, and one asked, did it evaporate the waterfall? Then he roared and flew high into the sky, and one said, he's flying straight here. The second disagreed and asked, to the west? Didn't he notice them? The first added, it's all thanks to the barrier. Then he said that they were very lucky, and asked, I wonder where he could have flown to. But if they came across a city on the way, that's it, the end. He laughed and thought, why do they even care? The protagonist was walking with a child in his arms, saw a dragon in the distance, and thought, this is a real disaster. The threat level of demons and magicians, the ranks of adventurers. The lowest rank is F, and the highest is the special S. In the meantime, they entered the city. He looked around, heard an unfamiliar speech, and thought, hello everyone. This is Kakyu. He is very nervous because of the large crowd of people. This was Bamora, a port city on the Great Elbatal River, the closest settlement to their forest hideout, about 80 kilometers north as the crow flies, located near a trade route that crossed the country, with a leisurely river that was easy to sail upstream, where foreign traders conversed in many languages. But the forest on the opposite bank of the river was the domain of a fire dragon, so it was not advisable for people without business to approach, and due to such geographical conditions, this place was a breeding ground for shady trade and slave trade. So why were he and Ars in such a place? He needed a slave to look after Ars. He covered his mouth with his hand and thought, the thing is, after the recent kidnapping incident, he decided to give up the idea of raising him alone and find a spouse to help him. Wasn't this a mating hunt? In order to free up time and resources, he needed to temporarily hand over some of the child's care to someone else, since there were no daycare centers here. He looked around and thought, but why were they looking at them so askance? Was a man with a child such a rare sight? At this time, 2 men stood and looked at him. One shouted for him to look, what easy prey. The other folded his arms and added, well dressed and with a child. The protagonist heard this and it dawned on him, so that's how it happens. He also took the child with him. Then he hid behind a brick wall and thought, it turns out that going somewhere with a child is much more difficult than he thought, and, as expected, he cannot find a suitable person for this role. Slaves in this country are, as a rule, people deprived of their rights for committing crimes. Among them, it is necessary to choose someone who can be trusted with Ars and who can cope with his uncontrollable magic, a person with sufficient strength and abilities. The protagonist exhaled and thought, yes, such people are not so easy to find. Kind, strong, reliable, and educated. Her image appeared in his head. Damn it, what did he do? He missed out on an incredibly talented person. He will never meet such geniuses again. At this time, Ars reached out his hands to him and said something. The protagonist smiled, thanked him and said, okay, Ars, what's done is done. MC tried to throw all these thoughts out of his head and thought that he needed to get ready. 2 young men were standing nearby and discussing something. One asked, really? If such a big client had arrived, there would have been more noise. The other raised his hand, disagreed, and added, he definitely heard the guys from the trading company talking about it. He looked at them and thought, they say that Sebas the Seer is in the city now. One said that since he had come specifically without an announcement, it meant that some major deal was being prepared. The other confirmed indeed this is an opportunity for their business. The protagonist thought in surprise, Sebas the Seer? Could it be Louis Sebastian? Louis Sebastian is the head of the powerful Sebastian Trading Company, dealing with everything from food to gold and slaves. In just one generation, he rose from the bottom to become one of the most influential merchants on the continent and a supplier to the Lawrence royal family. He raised his hands, smiled, and shouted happily. Even he, a small merchant from the outskirts, knows about him, although I am not sure if this is true. Good news, Ars. The little one also raised his hands and agreed. A merchant like Sebas the Seer can definitely help him find the right person. Great. Then their goal today is to find Sebas and establish contact with him. Right? An abandoned building on the opposite bank of the Elbat River, Bamora. Meanwhile, her hands and feet were shackled. She sat and thought, why then could she believe his words? After all, she thought that she would never be able to trust anyone again. Then Sebas came to her and said, Elsa, the ship is ready. She agreed and began to climb up. Meanwhile, the protagonist was running away from his pursuers. The seller was screaming at him to stop. That bastard burned down his store. The protagonist ran as fast as he could and thought he was apologizing. His child breathes fire when he sneezes. People parted and looked at him. Then he ran into a dead end, saw a wall next to him and thought, this is no luck. Several people caught up with him and one screamed, he was cornered. The second added that he should give up. They would hand him over to the police. He turned around, smiled, raised his hands and loudly told them to wait. Negotiations. He would compensate them for everything. The seller looked at him and screamed, only an idiot would believe his words. Has it been a while since he looked in the mirror? He clearly has the face of a swindler. The protagonist thought, he hasn't heard that addressed to him for a long time. Suddenly people screamed, hey, what is he doing in the city? Those who can should save themselves. To the ship. MC raised his head up and saw a fire dragon flying with its mouth open. He said in fear, oh, what? Then he pulled himself together, stretched his hand up and shouted for him to take it easy. Is he ready to take responsibility if Ars gets hurt? The dragon flew on, spewing fire from its mouth, and the protagonist thought, where did the fire dragon even come from? Although he saved him. Then he said, now we can get out of here, and remembered about his village. Then he stopped and thought, but is it worth running away? At this time, the dragon flew over the ships and spewed fire at them. Elsa stood on the ship and looked into the distance, when suddenly Sebas shouted, fire dragon, they need to turn the ship around. They're coming back. Then Elsa asked him to wait. The children didn't have time to get on the ship. Sebas looked at her in surprise and asked, what? A fire dragon? Damn, it's dangerous. Then she pushed off the ship, flew and shouted that she would help them. Sebas told her how brave she was. And the protagonist looked at the sky and thought, what should he do? If he got involved in a fight, too many people would see him. If he killed a dragon with attribute power, even the Holy Church would know about its existence. In order to save a stranger, he would have to risk Ars become a target for the Holy Knights to pursue? If he did what was best for Ars, then he should run. That would be the right choice, right? He lowered his hands, clenched his fists, and thought that he couldn't. At that moment, everyone heard a clicking sound, raised their heads up, and the man shouted for them to look. The girls said in surprise, what? At that time, someone threw a chain with an anchor on the dragon and was climbing up this chain. Kakyu couldn't see the person. Then she threw off her cloak, and he saw Elsa swinging two swords. She rushed to attack. One sword broke on his shell. She turned around, not letting him understand what was happening. Then threw a chain on him, climbed up the chain. He pulled the chain. Elsa spun around the dragon on the chain several times and attacked him, again and again. Then she ran away from the dragon on the roofs. It was moving slower and slower after her. The protagonist looked closely, recognized her and thought, this is then. Elsa looked and thought, this fire dragon, judging by its slow movements, it is all in wounds, the work of people? Are people so stupid as to anger him and provoke him to attack the city? In any case, in an open fight she has no chance against him, but she needs to at least buy some time. She raised her hand and said Twilight. The protagonist looked closely and was surprised. Blinding magic? Elsa used body strengthening and rushed towards the dragon, waving her sword, and used blade dance magic. At that moment, the swords attacked the dragon again and again. The villagers clenched their fists, watched and shouted, she will succeed. She will defeat the dragon. Kakyu watched and thought, no, she does not leave him any damage at all. With the last of her strength, making wild cries, she attacked again and again. He carefully watched what was happening, then thought, this is bad. She is just trying to buy time for everyone to run away from here. At that moment, the dragon destroyed the brick wall with its tail, and Elsa flew down along with the rubble of the wall. She screamed, destruction. Elsa flew and screamed, no. The dragon began to release flames from its mouth. People ran away and screamed. She was beaten. They have to run. She flew past the man. He ran and exhaled, then screamed, almost touched. At that moment, the protagonist managed to catch her in his arms. She exclaimed, and he asked, does she remember him? He can't let his son's benefactor die in front of his eyes. He put her down on the ground. She was very surprised and screamed, him? Why? No, how? The protagonist continued to ask her to wait, then apologized and asked, they don't have much time now, so could she quickly answer one of his questions? Can she cast a blindness spell on everyone nearby? She looked at him and answered that she could, but then asked why, and added, only for a few seconds. MC answered that it would be enough, even more than necessary. He began to get ready. She was surprised and asked him to wait. Then he gave her a child in her arms, and she asked, his child, what is he going to do? He left and said after her that he wanted to destroy the fire dragon. She stood with a child in her arms and asked, destroy the fire dragon. She put her finger to her forehead and said, twilight, veil. She didn't understand where this feeling of déjà vu came from. There's great confidence in this man's words. Does he really determine the surrounding situation using sound magic? Darkness suddenly fell. One asked what happened to his eyes. Another shouted that he could not see anything. At this time, the protagonist approached the dragon and ordered him to look at him. The dragon opened its mouth and rushed to attack. At the same second, the protagonist swung and a clot of power formed in his hand. He threw the clot straight at the target, and the dragon was torn in half and it began to fall. Later, the twilight began to disappear. The protagonist approached Elsa, who was kneeling, and asked, her name is Elsa, isn't it? He has a request for her. He knelt down, stretched out his arms to her, and asked, can she take on the role of a mother for this child? She looked at him in surprise, and at that time, people were looking at the dragon lying on the ground. A little earlier, a few months ago, the magical land of Lawrence, the depths of the royal castle. Erud looked at the picture and said, Twilight Elsa, a loyal servant of the royal court, there's a secret mission for her. She knelt down, bowed her head and agreed. The intelligence department of the Kingdom of Lawrence, Twilight Elsa. He said, that night, in the former barracks of the Knightly Order, a secret meeting is planned between a merchant from the Dark Guild and an aristocrat. The subject of their deal will be magical artifacts, whose appearance can threaten the well-being of the people. A little later, Elsa was sitting upstairs, watching what was happening, and remembering the words he said. For the prosperity of the magical kingdom, she must eliminate the merchant shortly before the deal. Right at the crime scene, Elsa prepared to attack, jumped from above and plunged her sword into him. His mouth began to bleed, and he asked, for what? Elsa. She could not believe her ears. She said, it cannot be, this voice, could it really be His Majesty? A little later she was in the courtroom, and she was sentenced. The judge said, thus, Elsa Twilight's fate is sealed, slavery for the crime committed. The guard grabbed her by the hair. She screamed for them to wait. His Highness Erud. This was his secret mission. It had to be a merchant from the Shadow Guild. He screamed at her to shut up, fool. Then he put his hand to his forehead, closed his eyes and added, His Highness was visiting the kingdom of Gareth that day, so that she would not babble nonsense. Erud Lawrence, the first prince of the magical kingdom. The judge pointed in her direction and told her to take her away. The guard began to drag her, and she begged, this is a conspiracy. If it is not exposed, the kingdom itself is in danger. So, she asked them to listen to her. Then the guard shouted for her to stop resisting. She screamed, brother, please, let him investigate. Later she was thrown into a cell. She sat on the floor and thought, they say His Majesty fell into a coma, at least he is alive. The guard asked why that woman was not sentenced to death. Is it really true that an attempted coup d'etat does not carry the death penalty? They say they are afraid of the revenge of her secret clan. Who would buy such a criminal even if he made her a slave? And Sebastian had been given such an unpleasant task. She had been deceived. She had sworn allegiance. She had sworn it. But why had she been so disgraced in the end? What did they want to achieve by this? It was she who had tried to harm His Majesty, whom she respected as her own father, with her own hands. She thought, this is unforgivable, this is unacceptable. Suddenly she heard the jingle of keys and someone shouted, Elsa-san. A little later they were riding in a carriage. She asked, Elvront, but this is the land of the elves, perhaps there will be a buyer there? He said that in order to avoid the posts, they would make their way through Nagraja and the old road of the Borkley forest. If they met monsters on the way, he was counting on her, Elsa. She sat behind bars and thought, but if she could atone for her guilt, she wanted to correct herself. But what would she have to do for that? She saved Ars, gave him to his father. He thanked her, and she thought, she doesn't want to be a sinner anymore. He knelt down, held out his hand